All right, so this is about products and technology, which is the crown jewels of any startup. Okay, and so the kind of things we want to cover here and the kind of things which are fair game for questions is about, a recipe for a compelling product. How do you dislocate market? How do you discover market dislocations or disruptions to exploit them? How do you protect your IP? How does an investor look at it from a point of view of, is there a market, and how does this product or how it might resonate? So, those kind of questions. So basically, anything to do all the way from product to IP, protection, funding, any questions, fair game in this particular session. Okay. So just about my journey, I've been in the Valley here since the early part of 80s. Right after college, within a year, I did a startup that went public, had a great outcome, and that was a fabulous experience. But I was like employee number 44 or something. It was called Sequent Computer Systems, went IPO and eventually purchased by IBM. So that was my first taste of blood, and that felt really good. But then reality set in. I got married, had kids, and I said, you know what? I think I want to work in a big company. I want to learn how really solid organizations are built, people, processes, products, and I ended up working at Hewlett-Packard for over a dozen years. And this is the time when HP was at its peak. David Packard was alive. He was the chairman. And I worked at HP, the second half of 80s and most through the 90s. So, over a dozen years at HP. And then a classmate of mine had founded a company, Lara Networks, a chip company, and he said, what are you doing at a big company? Come join me. And so I left the safety net of a big company, and I've not looked back since. And I've been very fortunate to have worked with all the folks in the panel you see in some capacity, either being on my board or being, my company counsel, or having worked in some collaborative format. So I know your panel. They're exceptional people here, and I'm going to start with Kumar as the first intro. So Kumar here, he's a serial entrepreneur, repeat entrepreneur. He is a deep technologist, and I think one of his best values is looking at market disruptions and really capitalizing them. He's founded two companies, VXTEL. This was in the late 90s when he saw what IP packets can do to disrupt voice and overall data and services around it. And VXTEL was acquired by Intel for its deep packet processing, voice over IP, DSP technology for about $500 or $600 million. And after being at Intel for a while, Kumar founded Virident in 2006, where he identified what the consumer flash memory is doing and how this will disrupt the enterprise storage business. So Virident was founded on that, and it was a good 7-year journey, and it was sold to Western Digital for about $700 million. So, combined exits of about $1.3 billion. So, I think you definitely want to ask him questions about, disruptions, about product, recipe, and, how to monetize those. He has a PhD from University of Illinois and from IIT Madras prior to that. Ramin, he works in the consumer internet sector. He's had experience for 20 years in product management, Nokia, Yahoo, and Hewlett-Packard. And most recently, he works for HomeUnion, which is an online real estate management company. So instead of selling products for $5 on the internet, selling products for $500,000. So again, I think this is going to be very interesting for consumer internet-facing products, the range of those and how do you successfully build products that resonate with customers. He has a double PhD from University of Helsinki. Steve Krausz is general partner at US Venture Partners, a legendary firm. He's been there for 30 plus years. He heads the IT practice. US VP has funded about, actually, $3 billion, if I'm right, of worth of investments across IT and healthcare practice, more than 450 companies, and more than 100,000 jobs created as a result of those investments. So really a phenomenal ride. And Steve personally has led too many investments to call out by name, but I would say more than 1 dozen IPOs that he has led personally. So, Steve, thank you for being here. Steve's doubly MBA from Stanford, so local. And Mike Danaher is senior partner at Wilson Sonsini, which is a legendary law firm, friend of Silicon Valley, founded in Palo Alto in the 60s, done IPOs of Apple, and again, very, very legendary law firm. And Mike in particularly is at the forefront of their venture capital practice. Mike serves on its board of investments and innovation at Wilson Sonsini. And again, I've been blessed or fortunate to work with Mike at one of my startups, Lara Networks. So thank you, Mike, also for being here. Okay, so that's your panel, just to warm you up. I'm going to start with one question for each of them, and then I'm going to open it up to you. So start thinking of what you want to ask them, right? So with Kumar, I think the first question I'm going to ask is, how do you identify disruptions? And given that the market is all moving to public cloud like Amazon, Azure, and others, is there any play left in the enterprise IT? How do you identify it? And what advice would you give to folks who are looking to do plays in enterprise IT, given the whole migration to the cloud is happening?
Thanks, Vivek. Good to see you all this morning. I'm privileged to be here with some of the stalwarts, and I've been fortunate to have been funded by a couple of guys a couple of different times in my lifetime. I call myself these days an obsolete infrastructure entrepreneur, pretty much, but still there is hope, is what I believe. So to come back to your question, it's not a simple way to identify where to start, right? So typically, I'll give you some of the experiences in my last startup and maybe the one before, that's too long. I had left Intel 2005, was bored, wandering in life. I can only torture my kids and pamper my wife so long. So I said, okay, we got to do something. So I spent some time really just, one of the hardest part for an entrepreneur, at least for me, is letting go of something I know deeply to really go explore something new. So telco market was my first company. We went after the telecom deregulation. That was a different time. It's an up and up to the right, and nobody could do any wrong. And we were fortunate to get a good outcome on that. So no more telco play. So I spent some time looking at all the different options. As an entrepreneur, looked at far left, went outside of IT, went to bio, came back, got knocked around. But net, what I was trying to build a conviction on is something which I feel is important for you to build conviction on passion on, is an understanding of a market evolution that you could serve very uniquely. Why now? Why you? Why here? Right? And that question process is what I went through for a year. So what we identified, 2006 was iPhones. I had a few friends in Apple, and Android was just getting picked up. So iPhones were coming out. We didn't know what shape or form, but they were going to use flash memory technologies. And having worked at Intel, we had spotted that we were putting in a lot of compute into processors. They were just starting the multi-core revolution in 2005, double core, quad core. It never ends. And the roadmap was clear for the next 5 years. So we felt that there was a data problem or a data supply problem that everybody would hit into. But it wasn't enough to start a storage company, and we needed another impetus. And so this confluence of the compute growth together with data needs, and the version 2.0 of internet was just starting. Google went IPO. Everything was around applications and creating data mining around those. So we said there is a way to take that draft behind the consumer flash and create an enterprise storage ecosystem. So it was a reasonable thesis, simple thesis, and very simple thesis, and we went out and started working on that, and we went through many different bumps and journeys, but net, we hung on to that thesis even during the darkest times. And the thesis was, can we take the economics of consumer flash and put it into enterprise storage and build reliable storage? And we found a market segment that was up and coming. So Facebook's and LinkedIn's and the social media guys wanted very fast storage to capture consumer attention, if you will. So that's the journey, and then the rest of it is just a lot of what I call, long days and short years. Okay. So net, we came out of it. These days, what I would tell you is I'm, again, back to square one, spending some time thinking about where things are, and I think there is a large enterprise cloud migration that's happening before us. So there is, you see the numbers. The big three cloud guys are spending $14-15 billion of data center spends, and they are going to need ways in which the enterprises have to migrate there. There's a center of gravity that's pulling them there. So we think there's lots of opportunities around that. I don't have an exact crystal ball, but ability to build software businesses on top of public cloud is a ripe opportunity for enterprises to go mine, okay? And if you have a company or thinking about a company, trying to leverage those narrow slivers around public cloud could be very, very profitable is my feeling. So things around data, how do you migrate, how do you manage, how do you control, how do you secure data is going to be a fundamental problem to every enterprise, even for the next 10, 20 years. And there's lots of opportunities there. And these days, I see a lot of pitches that has the machine learning and AI buzzwords there. My advice is don't fall into that trap. Think through the problem, think about the application of these things, and really build on top of it as opposed to trying to sell another infrastructure in there. So that's where I'll stop. In an enterprise cloud, $1 trillion shift, there's a gold rush that's happening. I think you guys should be able to find something.
All right, thank you, Kumar. Appreciate it. We'll save the rest of for questions to Kumar after we go through the one question for each of the panelists. Ramin, you've been in product management on the consumer-facing, internet consumer. HP Snapfish, which you were running at that point in time, product in tens of dollars. And now HomeUnion, product in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you sort of, share with the audience here your insights of, what's same, what's different, and given that you're selling through a website, portal, set of applications, you're not really interacting with the customer on a face-to-face way in the traditional model. How do you really figure out a recipe to resonate with your customers?
Sure. It was actually for me a journey. In HP Snapfish, we were selling the whole user experience where a user can upload their photos in the cloud, and they can build a product, buy it, and buy it for $10, $20, $30. We obviously had to connect with emotional side of the user. We have to educate them about the product and about the experience. And we were trying to connect in that part. Each product by itself, I think there are a couple of values there. One is the practical value of the product. Another one is the perceived value of the product. In some cases, social value or maybe identity value. So all these values could be applicable for a product. Many of them may not be applicable for a product. So as a product manager, I think, or my job is to say which of these are applicable and how can I educate and communicate that value to the user. Obviously, when the products are lower end, a few of these values are kind of contributing or elements are there. When the value of a product suddenly goes to $50, $250, $25,000 or $100,000, now we have to find what are these virtual values we can tap in. More virtual benefits I can give, especially before user is buying the product, better and more successful I am to build that trust with the user. So for a high-end product, I have to look to see what are those values, how can I communicate and educate them to the user, and be able to divide those between before the product is purchased, while I'm educating myself to buy that product, during the product purchase, and after the product purchase. Especially for high-end item, the experience that I'm spending a huge amount of money, not because of that product experience by itself, but a long-term relationship that I have. So a big part of it comes a matter of building the trust. Why you have to come and spend $100,000 in my website and buy a product. The way that we can convey what kind of value you get out of these is going to be much, much more challenging for us, for example, in HomeUnion, as we are kind of delivering this kind of high-end value products, compared to the time that I was in Snapfish, because I was, for many of the users who are buying, let's say, $10, $20 product, many of them even they go up to say, I will buy experience, if it is good, I will buy again. But when it's a matter of the high-end product, you are not going to do that. You're going to possibly buy this product and you have to have a lot of information about it. So as a product manager, for me, my job is much more sensitive and important to understand the whole value of the end-to-end value. How can I convey that value during the journey of the before, during, and after purchase of the product? And that becomes the area that I'm learning about it, and I'm trying to say what the value is that. I think more focusing on the value design rather than a specific experience design.
All right, Ramin, thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be more interesting questions, given there's so much interest in consumer internet and selling over the internet. All right, Steve, I think we're going to increase the level of difficulty of questions. We started with bachelor's, master's, PhD. So, Steve, you've been around the industry for a long time. You've seen so many trends. I mean, this is the Valley and startup world is all about chasing hot trends. Most recently, self-driving cars, whether it's machine learning, big data prior to that, or going back, maybe we're, a little older times, optical networking or whatever it is. So how do you navigate your investment decision process to figure out, which companies are worthy of investment, whether the timing is right or not, or whatever. So please share with us, about these hot trends and what people in the room should do when they give their slide deck. Should they be loading it up with buzzwords or not?
Well, it depends on who you're talking to. For us, I'd go modest on the buzzwords. I think one of the hardest things to do as an investor is to determine what's the trend that you want to invest in and when do you want to enter that market. And so I'll give you a couple, from our perspective, I think we take two different approaches to our investment thesis and the ways that we pick markets to invest in. One is, sort of the classic, and I'm sure you've heard this before, the Brave New World kind of investment, where there's really a trend that is a dramatic change in past practices, and because there's a technology shift, there's something happening that's quite different. And then the other is more incremental. The other is, it used to be called better, faster, cheaper, but in this day and age, it's creative innovation. And I think to some extent the cloud change is some of that. I mean, the movement from enterprise software, to cloud-based enterprise software, that's really, not a recognition that there's something dramatically different and new, that a market that doesn't exist. I'll give you an example of a market that didn't exist that we invested in back in the mid-90s that continues to be a source of exciting investment opportunities and has been a great returner for USVP, and that was security. Back in the early 90s, before anybody had any experience, with malware and with threats and with people invading your enterprise, there was the beginnings of the internet, and frankly, one of the things that we did as a thesis at our firm was say, what are going to be the important new things that are going to come out of this development? And one of the things that we identified early on was the fact that, for the first time in your life, you're going to have enterprises that are going to be open to the outside world that had never been, something that enterprises had to concern themselves with in the past. So in looking at those kinds of companies, what we look for are the best practitioners from the top universities, from the best think tanks, the guys who really know the technology well, and you've got to grab some of those. So the first company that we invested in that space was Check Point. And at the time, there were a number of firewall companies, but there were only a handful. But Check Point clearly had these guys out of the 8200 unit in Israel. They had been battling this battle in the cybersecurity market against national actors at the time, and so they really had the technical understanding of how to fix a Brave New World problem. And so that company, when we went to sort of do all of our diligence, one, there was a technical diligence on the people. They came out stellar. Some of them had a little bit of experience in enterprise companies, but really they had nothing other than this incredible background that was unique and very rare. I mean, at that point in time, you could count, on a single hand, the number of real technical experts who understood that well. So we have to identify those in the Brave New World kind of investments. The other phenomenal thing was, as I was over there at one of the first diligence meetings, there was a fax machine in the back room, and that thing kept ringing, and I said, well, what's going on there? those were POs coming in. So that's another good thing to find when you are looking at diligence in an investor. Are they actually getting early revenue? And in this case, they were getting an incredible early revenue. We actually bought secondary shares from BRM, from the guys at Nir Barkat, who's now mayor of Jerusalem. We didn't put money into the company. The company was built on a $150,000 loan, and BRM, when the company went public, actually in a moment of I think he had tongue in cheek, he says, "Hey, Gil, are you going to pay me back that $150,000 that you owe me?" Gil said no, but BRM turned out to do all right in that. So that's the Brave New World side. On the other extreme of how we look at investments is on these sort of incremental investments. I'm on the board at Box. Box's initial product, was going after this file sync and share, trying to change the way, people did storage in the cloud. And you all probably know that there have been plenty of efforts to do storage in as a service in the past, in the late 90s and early 2000s, and most of them had taken a ton of capital and failed miserably. So what did we see that was different? A couple of things. One is we saw that there was good customer traction, albeit it was consumer at the time, but we quickly sat down with the founders, with Aaron, and said, "Do you really want to do consumer? I mean, this freemium model is getting some traction, but over time, is that really a good business model?" And so, we identified the fact that there was going to be this cloud shift, there was going to be this change in consumer behavior, but more importantly, we anticipated that there was going to be a change in enterprise behavior. And so we made the investment with the expectation that the company was going to shift. And what was different from the Checkpoint case was here the team we thought was remarkably good at the ability to adapt and the ability to move quickly as the market matured with them. So in that case, there was a major trend that we knew was going to happen on cloud. It was going to be huge, but it was less important there that we had absolutely stellar differentiated technology people. What was important there was, do we have a team that is very coherent and very quick to respond to market trends and able to shift and make changes as the market changed. So we made the bet before they made the shift to enterprise, but we could see once again that some revenue was coming in, but we saw a team that was focused, but also one that was able to move quickly and respond to their customers. So those are the kind of examples of two very diametrically different decisions we made. One where we invested in this Brave New World where you had to have technically superior people who couldn't be replicated elsewhere, and then you could fill in the team around them. And the other was where you had a team that had already done something, big market, and the market was, they were able to adapt very quickly. But in both cases, what's the common theme? Huge market. Huge market where there's very large technical disruption happening. It's just different in the two different models, and I think you have to get both of those right.
All right, well, thank you, Steve, for that wonderful answer. All right, Mike, save the hardest question for you. You know how much I love lawyers. One of the challenges for entrepreneurs is figuring out how much IP to share so that they get, enough interest in funding. But on the other hand, not to disclose IP that essentially makes it really difficult to patent and protect the IP from, inadvertent disclosures. So my question to Mike would be, for entrepreneurs in the room, how do they balance these kind of opposing interests, and what is your advice for entrepreneurs in that?
It is a really tough issue, and I get asked this question several times a month by new startups. I thought I might start off with a fun story about this. There's a young entrepreneur from Santa Cruz in the early 2000s, 2003 or whatever, said, black limos in New York have trouble connecting with their customers. I can do something on flip phones that help them connect to their customers and so forth. And he raised a little money on Wall Street and got going, and then funding market was bad, and he was having trouble raising more money. So he found a friend, a buddy of his, who said, "Look, I'll help you," and shared all his schematics, everything he learned, his business plan, all the thinking he'd been doing about this for several years. And his buddy helped him. They went to a venture firm and they pitched and so forth. And the venture firm funded his buddy, Travis Kalatnik, to start Uber. And the Santa Cruz entrepreneur was left out in the cold. So yeah, it's a real problem. varies quite a bit by the nature of the business and what your secrets are. So first point of advice is don't tell your secrets if you don't have to, right? If you're got a new way to do radar for autonomous cars, you don't have to tell folks, here's how we do it. You can say, here's what I can accomplish. Here's what the specs are for you, what the cost is going to be, or whatever. That doesn't work if it's a internet model. I'm going to, help you buy homes or invest in homes on the internet. There's not. Once you've disclosed that, you've given away most of the idea, and then it's about execution. So the second thing is you use NDAs when you can. The law will protect your confidential information if you treat it as confidential. If you don't use NDAs, you're not treating it as confidential. So you got to mark things that way. And use the NDAs wherever you can. Can't rely on them completely because information leaks. Not everybody's honorable, or they forget that they signed an NDA or what's confidential or whatnot, but they do help. And if you're going to use an NDA, keep copies. You're surprised how many entrepreneurs fail to do that. Go further. Keep copies of your meeting notes and your slide presentations and who was at the meeting. I remember one of my clients said, gee, a big company who's nearby here, I won't name them, has filed a patent application. Not only is it about the topic that we discussed with them under NDA, but they have one of our slides from our presentation in their patent presentation, and here I've saved my meeting notes and we can prove it. So we're able to sort that out pretty easily with the general counsel's office of the big company. But saving those notes, who's in the meeting, is like, that's good practice. Saving the agreements, that's essential. When you're meeting with VCs, the problem is severe because generally they won't sign NDAs. You try to disclose less if you can. If you get further down the road and they're bringing in a technical expert to do a deep technical dive, those people would and will and should sign NDAs. You can get some protection on that. But oftentimes, the venture model is, I've got my thesis, I want to invest in this space. I want to meet every team in this space and find the best one to work with the best ideas. So much of the time you're meeting with people who are really doing diligence and have a slim chance that they'll invest in you because they've met with 10 teams in the space. Maybe you got a 10% chance or less. So you have to, worry about, are these people I know? Can I trust them? Do I know them before? How much can I share? What can I do to qualify how interested they really are in me? And partly, many cases, Steve will tell you, it's less about the idea, more about, can I depend on these people to execute? And they're not, most of the time, not worried about taking your ideas. It's about finding a great team to back. The last thing you can do, and it only works for some businesses, it wouldn't work for HomeUnion, but you can patent. And for people who have the budget and the like to do a robust patent filing, that's the best thing you can do. But a lot of entrepreneurs won't have that, or they're at the early stage and they're still trying to vet whether their idea is worth investing in, so they don't want to spend the money. So something is better than nothing, my patent partners tell me. You can file a provisional, doesn't have to be expensive. You can take the 5 slides from your presentation that describe your technology and make a provisional patent filing based on that. And it can be withdrawn before it ever publishes if you decide that's what you want to do. Or you can convert it into a full patent application within a year. And if you've done that, particularly if you have a patentable invention, whether it's a radar design or a new battery chemistry or whatever, you really want to do that before talking to big companies, before talking to technical experts, even before talking to VCs who are then going to want to ask technical experts themselves, is this feasible, is it a good idea, or whatever, because it's a first to file regime right now, and you're at risk if you don't do that. And even if some big companies are more aggressive than others, but even if it's one that considers themselves very, very ethical, there will be individuals there who haven't gotten the message or a little bit sloppy and work on a patent filing with ideas that they've gotten from you. If you've got your foot in the door, your time marker with a provisional, you're better protected. So that's the advice I give. It doesn't solve every person's situation, but it helps for a lot of them.
All right, Mike, thank you so much.
Could I just add a comment to Mike?
Absolutely, Steve.
So I want to say that what Mike said is becoming more and more important on the IT side. You know, we do healthcare and IT. You know, those of us on the IT side, myself included, used to, you know, listen to our healthcare guys drone on and on and on about IP protection. And we said, we don't have to worry about that on the IT side. No longer the case. Competitors have become a lot more aggressive about, they have figured out that they can drive you into bankruptcy, very easily if they run up litigation costs and run up these IP costs. So you have to be a lot more careful. So find a really good attorney who knows the competitive landscape and say, you don't want to go, maybe you just don't want to talk to that company's, BD group right now. I mean, there's a whole lot of changes in the industry that I think that all of us who lived in a different regime are a little ingenuous about and need to get a lot more disciplined about, unfortunately, than we have been in the past. Because there's no better way to take out a bright, young, upstart competitor than to just outspend them in court.
Thank you so much, Steve. That really resonates well. I think we've all seen that.
We've all faced it more and more, yeah.
Hi, I'm Karanveer Mundre. I run a biopharma consulting firm and a public relations firm called Atharva in India and Bangalore. My question is, a lot of the technology which we want to use may not be new, may not be patentable, maybe only an application of the technology. Where do we go from here? And I heard the last comment about not speaking to the BD teams and things like that. So where do we draw a line between secrecy or confidentiality and openness? Because the last session I attended, they told me very clearly that secrecy doesn't count at all, and it's all about the implementation and the execution. So you should go ahead and talk about your idea to as many people as possible, and because they'll give you ideas, further ideas. So I exited with that, and now I came back in and I heard this to find a good lawyer and.
It's so situation dependent. If you've got a patentable invention that's going to be the foundation of your company, you really have to be protective of that. If you've got, I'm going to do consulting services, or here's a new way of organizing the manufacturing flow for customers, is not protectable, and you have to talk to people and find out what they need and get them comfortable with you, and knowing that you'll have competitors in the market.
So my comment comes from the fact that I've been on 70 boards, which is a lot. But more to the point that I'm seeing changes in the industry that I think are profound and we should just be aware of. So you just have to be careful. You have to be thoughtful. I think you can trust generally, and talk to your advisors. I mean, they're not going to know all of the people you talk to on the BD side or the venture side, but just use good judgment and be open with your advisors about what you can review and what you know. I'm just raising the flag, saying I'm seeing more and more from a competitive point of view of this kind of problem coming up on the IT side. And as I said, we've lived with a lot in the healthcare side for a long time, and they've, it's the way we have seen it. What's happened is on the healthcare side, we did all this IP diligence and paid a lot of money to lawyers before we made investments. I think we may, I hope we don't have to see this, but we may see more of that on the IT side. It's just a raising the yellow flag, saying things are changing, pay attention, and be mindful.
My name is Krishna. I've been around 18 years bootstrapping the Valley. 99, I was doing a ride-sharing, carpooling startup, and I was told I was stupid by some investors. But over the years, I created Agile Entrepreneurs, which is what I'm a founder of now. It's a networking group for founders of startups who are bootstrapping. So my question to you is, there is a gap, and it's a healthy and reasonable gap between what investors want and what bootstrapping entrepreneurs want. And most bootstrapping entrepreneurs will not get funding because you will ask them, do you have traction? So what we try to do as a group of entrepreneurs is help them get there. And do you see this as a challenge? Do you see this as a need? Even with Y Combinator, only 3% of people can get in. So where is that tech crunch of bootstrapping entrepreneurs? Where is that? I mean, I see hundreds and thousands of successful entrepreneurs and startups with bootstrapping. What do you see? And would you like to talk to the group? Many of them will never get funding, but maybe they will survive and not go bankrupt if they can focus on building value and product market fit on their own before they hope to get funding from you.
All right, Steve, looks like that's for you.
It's all Steve.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's always a question of our time. But we don't do seeds by and large. We just do Series A, where there's a little bit, sometimes a little bit of revenue or something, at least in beta form, where we can check it out a little bit. But I would say that we are very supportive of folks trying to bootstrap their operations a bit. It does a couple things. One is it shows the all-in commitment of the entrepreneurs to really make this happen at all costs by putting both their time and their dollars and their relationships into it. But it is, it's a challenge because the entrepreneurial community has grown so quickly. There are so many bootstrapped operations and so many folks out there banging on a handful of small doors. It makes that process difficult. So there it's a question of just use your networks as much as you can. And I think that the challenge for a lot of bootstrapping entrepreneurs is they're so inwardly focused on getting the product done. They should find somebody who can spend, while they're off doing the engineering, who is out there doing the relationship building with folks that might give them some seed capital or identifying partners that they can go to. So have somebody like that in your organization who's outward facing rather than just inward facing, and I think you'll get a lot more success.
So as a small bootstrap company who is trying to figure out a product market fit, is it better to price the product at a low value, get more customers, potentially more customers, and then find out more of the requirements? Or is it better to basically price the product at a higher value and continue with them? Like, is it better to have more customers at lower value or very small number of customers at a higher value?
All right, I think I'm going to ask both Ramin and Kumar to speak to that question from their respective, segments and experiences. Why don't we have Ramin speak from the consumer side?
Sure. So it really depends on the product that you're building and the service that you're having. What I'm trying to tell myself constantly, don't put the price on the product itself or the experience that you're having here. Try to see what is the overall long-term experience that you want to deliver, long-term value that you have. If that long-term value is longer, you possibly have opportunity to price it a little bit higher because you're going to build a longer-term relationship with the customer. If the experience is buying a $5 piece of something and you're going to use it sometimes, no. Most probably the relationship that you are having, the trust that you are building with the product is much more shorter. In that case, I think you will have a tougher time there. So I'm looking to, I will kind of put myself and say, find if there is element of trust there that you need to build a long-term relationship or overall the long-term value. If those are yes, then most probably you can go after that because that's much easier for the VCs when you are going and pitching and you are building it based on the longer term value and relationship.
Yeah, so in my experience, more on the enterprise side, coming back to the bootstrap entrepreneur comment, I've seen a lot of enterprise companies get funded on concept pitches if the value proposition and the capability to deliver that is very clear, right? It's a new deep intellectual property coming from the experience of the team or some disruption in the market. Coming back to your pricing question, in our experience, I believe price is the last thing for the customer initially in the enterprise sector. So you really have to solve a problem that, that's difficult, that's really changing their business value in a profound way, okay? To have a conversation on price. And price in the enterprise markets, typically, it's not like consumer, it's not, eyeballs. I heard an interesting joke yesterday, I'll tell you guys later. One eyeball or two, what does that mean? When you count the eyeballs these days. But anyway, so for the enterprise sector, it's more around, really, this capability is new. Maybe it's an adjacency around, something in storage or networking or cloud software or hybrid infrastructure. And the value to the customer is very high, the business value. So the price is never the issue. We never sell on price. We never discount it. We may take it, if we don't do our job right, we may give, the 1.0 may not meet the requirements. So we may give a way to price it to the 2.0. But it has to be a certain price in the enterprise sector. You can't sell, typically anything less than $50,000 to $100,000 per year per customer. Otherwise, it's hard to create enterprise businesses, in my view.
Simrit Singh Kambol, Align Tech. one of the partners, one of the bootstrappers with the 5 other bootstrappers, and that's total, I guess, dozen boots for you guys. And so that's a question. There are 6 of us working on 2 related products. We can't figure out which one we're going to run with first. So, I mean, I'm not running right anytime soon. In about a month, I'll be running again. But can we, is that too big a team? What I heard from the previous meeting, like my colleagues here, is 6 too big a number? Or can we, and then we can't make up our mind which one is ready now, and can we bring the both to the table? If we think it's related, that's why that there are 6 people in there.
The number of people in the team was, my first company, I had 5 co-founders with me, so including me. So it's not the number, it's the connectivity and the value to each of these members, right? So what I'm unclear on is really, are these, Uber on one side and storage networking on the other side, then that's usually not a good fit. Okay, but how to prioritize them really depends upon the unique value proposition and your ability to deliver on this as a team, right? So it may get fractured. There are lots of cases of companies that have got fractured. There's famous examples of optical networking companies that start, and there's a bunch of hot founders, and they all want to go in different directions, and the same idea gets repeated 3 times, and all 3 companies exit, if it's a good enough idea, is what I would tell you.
Well, I wasn't in the last meeting for very long, but I would say startups aren't democracies necessarily, and you do need some leadership, but you want a coherent team. So it's not a question of size, it's a question of, does everybody have a role to play, and are they all being orchestrated in the right direction without a lot of distractions and drama and tension that's going on. That's different from the burn rate question, obviously, but I think that you want to see a coherent team, that everybody is rowing in the same direction, has a specific responsibility. To the question of 2 ideas, I'll just mention my bias. My bias is I want to see a fanatical focus on one idea, and if there's multiple ideas competing for attention and resources, that can be take time, dollars, effort, and personalities all have biases, and whose children is most attractive is always a problem. I don't want to make that choice. You have to make that choice.
Hi, I'm Gaurav from Innoplexis. We are using AI to cut 10% time for a drug that takes from synthesis to approval. My question is, what kind of opportunity do you see in building niche app stores for dedicated verticals, for example, life sciences or healthcare?
I think I was just looking the other days, looking for exactly the same things. I personally was looking for finding a particular app and particular usage on certain verticals. I think gradually people are starting to look for particular items. And now, as you have so many apps out there and so many applications, it's much harder to find a way for those particular segments and category. I think this is something that is going to come, and but the problem might be that in a specific category you have a very small segment, and getting attraction for that segment, showing the value for the buyers there is going to be challenging. So some of the segments maybe become very successful in the niche markets, but many of these segments may appear but may not be necessarily successful by them because of the niche focus that they have.